approach. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, as we be looking at the evaluation approach based on the wisdom in Swahili Proverbs, and we'll be hearing a lot from Dr. Almas Fortunatus Mazigo from Tanzania Evaluation Association, and also he's a lecturer at the University of Dar es Salaam. Just to for our start, I would encourage us to use the question function on our chat to pose any questions that we have for Dr. Almas, and also chime in into the chat and give your contribution and your reflections on his presentation to make this more engaging. As I have said, my name is Mark Mulobi, and I want to introduce our guest speaker today, Dr. Almas Mazigo, who is a lecturer and a researcher based in the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. He holds a PhD in applied ethics and from Sanford University from South Africa. He has a Master's of Arts in Development Studies from the University of Dar es Salaam, and a Bachelor in Philosophy from Pontifical University in Italy. Dr. Mazigo is committed to undertaking social and ethical inquiries to understand social, cultural, and moral resources which can influence positively the practices of individuals and collective moral agents to responsibly engage in improving human conditions and addressing sustainability and challenges. He has researched and published on ethics, poverty, prosperity in the small-scale fisheries sector. He has conducted an empirical development on ethics. He has also led community-led transformative social innovations. He has also worked on ethics and leadership challenges during the pandemic, especially this COVID-19 that we had. He also looked at African humanism and eradicating extreme poverty worldwide. Dr. Mazigo here is a staunch promoter of the field of development evaluation in Tanzania. He is also a pioneer and a coordinator of the Masters of Arts in Development Evaluation program offered at the University of Dar es Salaam. And he has co-led building capacities for development evaluations projects to enhance knowledge. And Dr. Mazigo serves as the board member of Tanzania Evaluation Association. And it is my great pleasure to give him the floor and invite him to talk to us about evaluation approach based on the wisdom of Swahili Proverbs. And as we say in Swahili, karibu daktari.
Asante sana, Mark, and my dear colleagues who are here present. I'm Almas Mazigo, and today I will be sharing with you the outcome of the research that we conducted in Tanzania, aimed at contributing to the Made in Africa evaluation agenda led by our African Evaluation Association. So today I will be sharing one of our products, and this product is a Swahili Evaluation Approach, which I hope that we can later be able to use, because it contains in it the specific guidance on how to conduct an evaluation, which is more democratic and which also aims to address and engage people's ways of knowing and valuing. And this work is a collaborative work. A lot of people have participated in this process of generating this evaluative insight and constructing the Swahili Evaluation Approach. I want, first of all, to acknowledge my partners, the member of the evaluation team, Dr. Francis Mwaijande, Dr. John Kihamba, Mr. Biria, Dr. Isaac, and Dr. Shop. These were the team of the TanEA researchers who engaged in this process. So I'm sharing what we have been able to do together. But also I want to acknowledge and appreciate very much the role of our assistant researchers, the young and emerging evaluators, by the name of Miriam, Fausta, Renatus, Neema, and Ikwabi, who are also students of a Master's in Development Evaluation at DUSE, but who had an opportunity to participate in this research, and their contribution was very much valued. But also we want to acknowledge the support and guidance also that we received from the experts of the Swahili Proverbs. And this one are the lecturers and researchers in Swahili literature based at the University of Dar es Salaam, Dr. Rosie Mbijima and Dr. Msigara. Then at sometimes we engage the Swahili speaking evaluators in Tanzania. 83 of them participated in a dialogue in which we reflected on the wisdom which is in the Swahili Proverbs and tried to reflect how could it inform our conduct of evaluation. These were the 83 who attended the workshop that we had at DUSE and later participated in the survey that informed the later processes of developing an evaluation approach based on the wisdom of the Swahili. I also want to acknowledge our other partners from the University of Dar es Salaam, DUSE, Mzumbe University, and the TNP, who allowed us and also gave us an opportunity to access their document and engage some of the people who had participated in their project to do a pilot evaluation using the Swahili evaluation approach. Then I would also acknowledge and I really very much appreciate the members of the Kipunguni community here in Dar es Salaam who participated in the pilot evaluation in which we were testing the Swahili evaluation approach. But most important, I want to acknowledge our AfrEA leaders, the president, vice president, and the members of the board and the secretariat who reviewed and gave comments on the several reports that we submitted. And also our friends from CaDEA who had some input on the initial documents of our report, and all the participants who gave comments during the dissemination that we had in December in Dar es Salaam. All this process was the process of engaging, dialoguing, and learning together on how to capture and use the Swahili evaluation, the Swahili wisdom in the Swahili to develop a Swahili evaluation approach. So you can see in the work of many people who participated in this process. Then I say that my work is twofold. First of all, I will, before I present the content and the guidance of the Swahili evaluation approach, I want to share you some background information in the methodology that we followed to capture the wisdom in these Swahili proverbs and the process that we engage to construct this. I think that is very useful to see how we're able to move, and that process could also be replicated if we find more proverbs from other communities. So some information, we were awarded, TanEA, we submitted a proposal and they were awarded a grant to conduct research on evaluative insight and the moral resources of indigenous people in Africa, which have the potential for invigorating democratization of evaluation and the fair engagement of stakeholders in evaluation. I want to emphasize the two ways that evaluation is ought to be a democratized, a process of democratic process where people ahead also could share their insight. So we are looking at the wisdom in the Swahili Proverbs that could really help us to achieve that, but also the engaging stakeholders. And sometimes we have limited engagement of the stakeholders. And what could this Swahili wisdom, the Swahili Proverbs help us to focus more on how to do it better? And that's why we use the word evaluating. And by then, we strongly believe that African insights, such as the insight in the Swahili Proverbs, can indeed inform, inspire, guide the practice of evaluation and the democratization of the evaluation process. And we found, therefore, we are following the proverb-based evaluation approach to developing an African-rooted evaluation approach, which is already in the literature. Some people are contributing that way, that following a proverbs-based evaluation approach is possible to come out with an evaluation which is rooted in the wisdom of the African people. And by proverbs, we knew that they contain wisdom, truth, and morals and traditional views on a specific issues. We know that wisdom covers a lot of things. Some people, because of their wisdom, instead of giving it, they could only give a statement, one proverbs, instead of giving a lecture, a 2 hours or 1 hour talk on several issues. But just by saying one proverbs, people get a message and they can do, they can react against, in line with that. So we also found that Eston, who had studied the proverbs in Western Africa, had also identified a variety of insights. And they argued that the inclusion in official evaluation practice into the training of evaluators. And he really identified proverbs which contain, cover the issues of measurement, comparative assessment, which emphasizes on the methods of inquiry, careful analysis, discernment of truth and falsity, which also cover means of promoting transparency, accountability, and good governance, and several issues. So we were really intrigued by his approach, and we decided to follow that approach. We thought that given that the wisdom have a lot of information to inform, to warn, and to guide, we thought that we could really find also proverbs in Swahili that could offer some new way of thinking about evaluation, imagining about evaluation, thinking about how we should design evaluation, thinking about the competence of the evaluator, thinking about how to engage people in evaluation, about measurement. So we were really interested to go and identify some of these proverbs. What we did, we had to search for the proverbs. We find many proverbs. And we basically identified 250 Swahili proverbs, which we thought they had those kind of wisdom that could really inspire and guide the practice of evaluation and the democratization of evaluation process. And these were the proverbs that were covering the social processes. And we, from the 250, we screened and we identified 45 Swahili proverbs. And these do highlight the importance of involving people in evaluation, in social processes. They also focus on the rights and duties of the people in that process. And they offer some effective strategies on engaging people in the social processes to achieve what is interested in. And since we knew the Swahili proverbs because we learned them in schools, since in primary school, we use them daily. But from a research perspective, we thought we need to engage some people who know better And that is what we had an opportunity to engage Dr. Laws and Dr. Msigara. And we were interested for each of these 45 proverbs to learn what is its origin, from which tribe was it really, because most of the proverbs are from the indigenous people, the tribes, 122 in Tanzania, but which were later translated in Swahili. So we wanted to know the origin of each proverbs, the context in which it was really developed, and the way it has been used, the wisdom it comprises, and its possible usage in evaluation. Could it really offer some new insight for understanding the evaluation process, for doing evaluation, for engaging people in evaluation, for understanding the evaluation? So that is what we were really interested in. And therefore, with the help of this expert and the other senior citizens and members of the Tanzania, like Mzee Ruta and the others, we started doing analysis on several issues. So some of the proverbs, we identified the proverbs which has focused on conducting and commissioning evaluation. When you hear a proverb like "Ahadi ni deni," a promise is a debt that ought to be repaid. We thought, what does it really mean? And what kind of message will it be giving to an evaluator when you're doing an evaluation, or when you're conducting, you're being said, hey, watch out, ahadi ni deni. What does it really mean? So we interpreted that it offers some way of understanding that conducting evaluation actually aims at determining the extent to which promises has been fulfilled. And the promises here, we understood that whenever you implement a project, the way you design it, the kind of things you say you're going to do, the kind of the contribution that you want to say this will contribute, that is a kind of promise that is being offered. So we understood that a project with all its content has some kind of promises that is offering. And if we want to see how it fared out, we want to see how it really fulfilled the promises. Could be all the inputs and the processes, but also the product that were probably that project could contribute to. And then we found some other proverbs that were pointing more on what could really be the reason of conducting a project evaluation. So we had these proverbs, which was interesting. Hila ya kikwapa kunuka pasipo kidonda. That the trick is to smell without a bad smell. And we understood from the explanation that people use it to warn people that the armpit doesn't have a soul, but it tends to smell bad if it's not taken care of. And with this kind of understanding, considering the promises that we have already thought of in the project, we thought that all the promises that have been made in a project may not be fulfilled, because also projects are destined to fail if not managed properly. So we thought that offers some insight on thinking of conducting an evaluation to determine and rectify possible shortcomings or failures, because the projects are destined to fail if they're not managed. Then we found some other proverbs which we interpreted that they insist on the importance of doing commissioning evaluation. And this is the proverbs, anayejipiga mwenyewe hali, the person who it seems does not really cry. And we thought it really emphasized about impartiality and objectivity, and thought that commissioning of evaluation is important to the external, because evaluators affiliated with the projects or program can hardly remain impartial and objectively when they're doing an evaluation to highlight their own weaknesses and failures. You need someone who can beat you mark so that you could cry. When you beat yourself, it's not easy to, because you feel sympathetic to yourself. We found proverbs also which emphasize on indicators and credible evidence. A proverb like dalili ya mvua ni mawingu, the sign of a rain is clouds. Whenever there is a smoke, there is a fire. That sense that there are already some indicators, already some Swahili people appreciate the indicators. We thought that those proverbs were emphasizing on paying attention to indicators. Then we found proverbs which emphasize on generating credible evidence, because you could also have fake evidence. And this one, the proverbs like Tanzania and DS here. So the one you suspect, you think isn't it? So you're likely to have fake evidence if you don't really pay attention. And there is no tree without its own fruit. And we interpret that there is always evidence on everything that you want. So we thought that could be emphasizing on generating credible evidence. We also found proverbs that emphasize on attitudes, the right attitude, the values and competence of evaluators. Proverbs like aingiaye baharini huogelea, whoever entered the sea must swim, because a sea and the ocean is something not to play with. So if you don't have the skills, you are right to die. And we thought that emphasized the possession of adequate knowledge and skills to be able to conduct evaluation and produce credible results. Then we found other proverbs like Penyenia, Padangia, where there is a will, there is always a way, a solution. It's emphasizing on the value of perseverance and determination when you are conducting or when you want to accomplish a task. Then there are proverbs which emphasize analytical skills and practicing independent judgment. This is a famous Swahili proverb, akili za kuambiwa changanya na zako. Don't only listen to others. So advice, add yours also, because you might also take it for a line. Then we had proverbs that emphasize on the ability to inquire and gather much information. The proverbs asiye na mengi hajua jifunzalo. Those who do not have much information do not know what they are learning. So the more you collect the information, the more you can learn from that information. Then there are proverbs which we thought they emphasize about being inquisitive. And this is asiye uliza hanalo ajifunzalo. Those who do not ask do not have what they need to learn. So an evaluator, we thought that could be an important competence and attitude that you need to have. Then proverb that emphasize impartiality and objective when implementing tasks. Mlengajiwe kundini hajui limpataye. Whoever throws a stone into a cloud does not know who it is it hits. So being objective, not targeting people, but trying to pursue the task that you are trying to do objectively and impartially. But also a proverbs on the kind of attitude that an evaluator need to have. The humble and practice humility. And the proverbs, msafiri maskini japokuwa sultani, a traveler is poor though he may be a sultan, because a sultan almost says everything. But when you go, you travel, there are things that you need to get from people, so you will even inquire from people. And you know, even Jesus was God, but when he had to ask some other people. So this is the message that also we get, being humble and actually humility is key. Then proverbs that emphasize suspending personal judgment and considering alternatives, like halali yako, halali kwa mwenzio, so that others don't be judgmental until we have satisfied ourselves with evidence. Then proverbs that emphasizing the ability to determine worthiness and the meetness, like under chairman who decided to kuvika pete might have determined something which is worth to deserve the lien. And also there are proverbs that emphasizing of being useful, caring and helping others, which is mgeni njoo mwenyeji apone. Let the guests come so that the host benefits or gets well. We expect the guest who comes into your house not to harm you, not to destroy you, not to take advantage of you, but also to contribute positively to your well-being and whatever. So we thought that is also pointing to what kind of expectation and the value that we have on the evaluator. But also proverbs that emphasizing not depriving people their rightful and entitled opportunities. Mgeni hachukui nyumba. We should not worry about the guests because we don't expect the guests to come and take your house, but we know there are guests who also come and do so. So warning us not to deprive people their rightful and entitled opportunities. Then we found proverbs that emphasize on involving local people. And they have several reasons. One is that we have to emphasize the potential contribution of the people, that people are capable of making things happen. That shughuli ni watu, social events are events of the people, need people. Penye wengi hapaharibiki neno, wherever there are many people, nothing goes wrong. And penye wengi pada mengi, wherever there are many, there is always much. So people have a lot of potential contribution. And that's what we need us to pay attention to. So we thought that was also an important thing to pay attention to when you're involving people. And there are proverbs that emphasizing people's role in the current co-learning and co-production of contextual knowledge about the intervention. Vichwa viwili ni bora kuliko kimoja, two heads are better than one. Kidole kimoja kivuji chao, one finger does not kill a lice. Peke peke huwezi tunga historia, you cannot produce a history alone. You need people who could offer you some information. And those, if you're interested on the information on the local context, involving local people is a must. Then there are proverbs also who emphasize in learning from the local people, the people who have experience with the phenomena. And these are the proverbs which translate the holes in a house are known to the owner of the house. Matundu ya nyumba ayafahamu mwenye nyumba. Then nyumba usiolala ndani hujui hila yake. You cannot know the defects of the house you have not slept in. Adhabu ya kaburi haijuae maiti. The torture of the grave is known only to the dead. So if you want to know what, certain phenomena, you need to learn from the people who have experienced it. And also we found the proverbs that emphasize learning from the local people who have a better knowledge of the context and values and issues. And this is Jogowa Shamba Hawiki Mjini. A country roaster would not crow in town because she doesn't know some of the things in town and therefore is afraid. And then we also found proverbs that highlight the challenge of involving many people. For example, one is cautioning about the cost of involving too many people in the evaluation process. And this is saying, kanyingi na saba upata mingi misiba. If you have many relatives, expect a lot. And then we have the one who also cautions about the possibility of losing control and spoiling the evaluation process. That manahoza wengi, chombo huenda mlama, with many captains, the ship does not sail properly. Or wapichi wengi wharibu mchuzi, too many cooks spoil the roof or sauce. So I thought that these proverbs are really pointing to a lot of important wisdom that we could make use of to try to improve our understanding of evaluation and our conducting evaluation if we are really serious about thinking in evaluation from the African philosophy, African worldview, African wisdom. So we thought the Swahili offers some kind of wisdom and guidance toward that end. But before we started thinking of the possibility of the Swahili evaluation approach, we engaged the 83 people I mentioned, and then in the survey, and we discussed on the possibility. The survey results are there, we'll share at a later stage, but they are all pointing on a possibility of the Swahili evaluation approach. But To be able to do so, we were challenged. And this was the challenge from the literature, especially from Mertens and Wilson, who argue that a robust approach to evaluation must comprise the philosophical beliefs. This includes the axiological belief system, which is the belief of the nature of ethics that guides interaction, but also an ontological belief system that help us understand or explain about the nature of reality, but in the context of evaluation, the nature of the everyone that we're trying to know. And then an epistemological belief system, which is about the nature of knowledge and the ways of knowing. And in the context of evaluation, the nature of knowing and the ways of knowing the evaluant. And the methodological belief system, which is about the systematic gathering of credible evidence, credible information about the phenomena that we want to study. And in the context of evaluation would be the evaluant. So we had to analyze now the 45 proverbs to see whether, in line with this approach, do also point to some philosophical belief that we could now constitute the philosophical system of the evaluation approach that we want. And therefore we had to analyze the 45 proverbs to determine the wisdom in them that points to ontological, epistemological, methodological, and axiological beliefs, and in turn influences the way we frame the meaning of evaluation, the purpose of evaluation, and the nature of the process of evaluation. And therefore we went back to the proverbs to see what proverbs would really point to a belief, ontological belief, and this is what the nature of the evaluant. And by the evaluant here, I mean a project or the program that we want to evaluate. And we thought the wisdom in nyumba usioilala ndani hujui hila yake, you cannot know the defects of a house you have not slept in. Kitanda usichokilalia hujui kunguni wake, you cannot know the bugs of a bed that you have not lain in. And we believe that this wisdom in these proverbs point and emphasize the fact that the phenomena, such as a house or a bed, must actually exist and be experienced by people for its issues to be known. You cannot know the bugs of the bed or the house if it doesn't exist. It must exist, it must be experienced. And in the experienced people who will tell you that bed, that house, that grave, it has such and such. And then we believe that in line with this kind of wisdom in these proverbs, therefore an evaluant, that which we want to evaluate is an existent, something which exists and which is experienced. And therefore the evaluant in this kind of ontological belief will be an existent and experienced phenomena. And therefore any project or programs to be evaluated, to be understood, must have been existed, must have been experienced by different stakeholders. But also we noted that anything, a single thing that exists is experienced and known different by different people. And some people know only some of the aspects or some of the dimensions, the sides of the evaluant, of that experience thing. Because depending on how they are related or how they have access to that, they may only know some aspect of the evaluant. And because of that, we strongly believe that this also points to an evaluant as a single reality or a single reality, but with multiple faces, multiple sides, multiple aspects of which are experienced differently by different people who are taking part in that. And that's, then we concluded that We have now some ontological belief that the evaluant must have existed and must have experienced, but people experience some of the aspects, some of which size, and therefore they would speak differently. And if we want to know the whole story, we need to engage all the people who know some many aspects of the evaluant. Then the next question and the belief that we had called was the belief in the epistemological belief. And this is, how does an evaluator know the evaluant? How do you know the project that you want to evaluate? How do you know it? If it exists and it has been experienced, then how do you come to know so that all the information you generate, people might find it credible? You have not experienced it. It has existed, but you have not experienced it. How do you know it? So we went back to the Proverbs and we find nyumba usiyoilala, ndani hujui hila yake, or whatever. And we thought that this emphasized that the context or issues of a phenomena are well known by those who have experienced it. And therefore we believe that in line with this system, someone without a personal experience of the phenomena cannot know that phenomena, but he can learn it from those who have experienced it. You as an evaluator, you have never been there. When the project existed, you did not experience it. You can only know about it from those who have experienced it. And then we concluded that the knowledge of the evaluant, of the project, or the program that you want to understand is possible through learning from diverse stakeholders who have experienced it and developed some knowledge about it. So we said, okay, here we have got also a tick that we can know the evaluant, and we know it through the people who have experienced it when it existed. Then we had to find also that point to axiological belief. And our question was, what ethical values and principles effectively inspire and guide the interaction of the evaluator and stakeholder in their attempts to know the evaluant? We said already from the ontological that the evaluant, the project or the program can only be known because it has actually existed and some people has experienced it, and that you can know it through the people who have experienced it. Then the question is, if you're an evaluator, you want to know that which you never experienced, how do you interact with the people, and what kind of ethics guides you so that your interaction could enable you to know the evaluant, that people could feel comfortable to share the insight with you. So we went back to the Proverbs and we identified ethical values and principles of cooperation, solidarity, respect, humility, collaborative learning, service, and the promotion of the common good in the Proverbs. In the Proverbs like shughuli ni watu, penye wengi hapaharibiki neno, vichwa viwili ni bora kuliko kimoja, kidole kimoja kivunji cha. All this shows some of the values that if we take them seriously and guide our interaction would enable us to learn from the people, and then we develop a good knowledge about the evaluant. We also identify the ethical principle of caring for and promoting the humanity of others. In mwenyeji njoo mgeni aponi, let the guest come so that the host benefits or gets well. And this one also you can know depending on how you care and engage people and how your evaluation will lead to that. Then also we believe that these ethical values and principles provide the basis for collaborative learning and the promotion of the humanity and welfare of the people. And it's only through that kind of relationship that will enable you to learn from the people in their, to learn from them on the thing that they have experienced. Then, that is how we learn from the people when we have established a good relationship. The last question was the methodological belief. what systematic approach would facilitate the gathering of credible information and evidence about the evaluation from the people? Because we know you could get fake information, fake evidence. What will facilitate the generation of credible evidence in that process? So we located the methodological belief, the proverb that highlight all of it, that highlight the competence, values, and attitude that we have already mentioned, the importance of involving knowledgeable and experienced people, and the importance of co-learning and co-production of knowledge, and the role of indicators and the generation of credible evidence. Then in line with such proverbial wisdom, we concluded that co-learning and co-production of credible information and evidence about the evaluant are possible only through well-organized and moderated dialogue, critical reflection, and consensus building in diverse stakeholders group. And I will come back to this when I reflect on the methodology. And therefore, the role of the evaluator here is to select and facilitate the representative of stakeholders group to learn and share the evidence for the fulfilled or unfulfilled promises, and learn their stories about the evaluant, because they can only tell some of the aspects of what they have experienced. And when you corroborate all these kind of stories, you can be able to get the evidence. Therefore, when having established all these important conditions for an evaluation framework, we thought that it was now possible to describe the content and the guidance in the Swahili Evaluation Approach. And this is now the approach and its content. And one of the important elements or dimension of this content is the meaning of evaluation. And then, based on the wisdom that we have already saw, we thought that if we are informed with the Swahili Proverbs, evaluation now is a systematic assessment of the fulfillment of the promises made in the intervention. And in line with this kind of framing, the guidance for the evaluators is always to assess the extent of the fulfillment of promises regarding the intervention process. So the process, what was promised was done. The input, the different resources that was put in the products, whether they have been achieved. Then if we, in that kind of understanding, the purpose of evaluation now is the generation of evidence about and remedies for the possible failure. We want to see if there were a failure, what are the evidence that point to that failures, and what remedies should be targeted on. So the aim is to generate evidence and remedies and possible failures. The nature of evaluation, we see now an evaluation is a social event in which knowledgeable and experienced people who have experienced the evaluation interact creatively and responsibly to co-learn and co-produce a credible story about the evaluation. So here the evaluator is guided to involve all the relevant people in the co-learning and the co-production of credible information about the evaluation. Then, in line with the philosophical belief that we have established now, we frame based on the ontological belief that the evaluant is a single but multifaceted reality. It's one reality. A project could be one, but it has several aspects and dimensions that people could have experienced differently. And because people experience differently, the evaluator now is guided to capture and interrogate the stakeholder stories about the evaluant, because one has already a story about a certain aspect which that is not telling the whole. So you need to engage this so that you get more credible evidence about this. And in line with the epistemological belief that knowledge about the evaluant is possible through close and trusted relationship with the stakeholders. And here, the evaluators are guided to pay attention to the stakeholders' ways of knowing, valuing, and measuring, and validating. Different stakeholders have their own way, and they have to capture the interplay of values and power when trying to understand. I will be through in 2-3 minutes, and therefore, the methodological, in line with the methodological belief, is that we can only know the evaluant, and we can do so by co-running and co-producing credible evidence and information about the evaluant through the people when we engage them in dialogue, critical reflection, and consensus in the different stages. And here, they are guided on cultivating and using their competency value that we have highlighted, promoting learning, and also be conscious of the fact that if they are not in control, the process could also go wrong, but also paying and avoiding fake evidence that could be provided. And the kind of ethics now which will get the interaction, the one which is possible to enable the establishment of human relationship, and that embraces the rational obligation of caring for and promoting the welfare of the people. So respect and caring and solving the problem of the people. And this is the process now, how now we understand the evaluation from this one. It's a social event involving dialogue, involving critical reflection, involving validating and challenging evidence, putting the evidence together so that we are creating the story or the history of what has happened about that project. This one will start with selecting the stakeholders, and then their group, you could have 10 stakeholders group, but you form, give them more democratic, to give them more space to dialogue and talk. They work in their small group, they tell their story, they validate their story, they validate the evidence. Then you take them into intra-homogeneous group, where now they have a more credible story from a certain group of stakeholders. And then you take them to a heterogeneous group where the different stories, version of a story from the different stakeholders are coming in and being tested, validated, until you reach on the last stage, whereby all the stories now and the evidence are put forward, which people could validate, and it is at this stage now you will have a credible story about the evaluation. You would have tested the different criteria, you have done it, and people could have been empowered, but all the evidence could have refuted, validated, and there is a lot of consensus on what has happened from the project. And this the evaluation approach, which we encourage you to work on. And in conclusion, I want to say that looking at the wisdom that we have already highlighted, we can conclude that wisdom in Swahili Proverbs indeed embody the philosophical insight that inform key theoretical and practical guidance for conducting evaluation, and they provide guidance on selecting and engaging participants, on designing and facilitating evaluation process, on utilizing different forms of knowing and the valuing of representative stakeholders group, and the most important, co-learning, co-generation, and co-validation of findings and the evidence of successful and unsuccessful development intervention. We thank you and invite you for the comments, and we hope you will learn more, and one day you can try to use the Swahili Evaluation Approach. Thank you, moderator, and thank you, colleague, for your attention. Asante sana.
Asante sana, Daktari. Thank you so much, Dr. Almas. Great, what a great presentation. And I want to pick a few questions that I've just seen across the board. Yes, we have a recording, and the recording and the presentations will be shared to you through AfrEA. Yeah, thank you. I'm just continuing to read a few commentary on the brilliant presentation that we've just had. And just again, Daktari, to reflect on on these Swahili proverbs, I got one, and just to engage us on how, like, for example, you are reflecting on all this. Msiba wa kujitakia hauna kilio. So I've been asked, can we use this for the commissioners or commissioning of evaluation? Msiba wa kujitakia hauna kilio. Yeah.
I think we can, but all that will depend on if we go back to analyze the context in which it has been used and what were the people thinking in that way. But I think we can use in terms of thinking on if we have failed to implement the project as we have designed, okay? And because we had all the resources, we had all the competencies, we have everything, and we did not deliver. Then when people tell us we failed, we have to blame ourselves. But if we have other reasons beyond our control, they were not blamable. But in the context in which we never did properly, actually huo ni msiba tumejitakia. And the msiba here, I would attribute it to the people who are evaluating the project that we did, and they say, you failed to fulfill what you had promised, and we are being blamed. But also, I could also attribute to the evaluators. If you don't follow properly the guidelines, you don't have the competence, you go there, you do an evaluation, and some other people come and do a meta evaluation. And then they say, you know, the quality of evaluation, is poor, while you had an opportunity to engage yourself to develop the competence and engage it. I will take you back to the Swahili Proverbs, another one which says, aingiaye baharini huogelea. You go to swim, you don't have the competence. If you die, huo ni msiba, and we say, okay, marehemu ameondoka, but amejitakia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great insights again from you, Dr. Almas. I want to see, do we have anyone? I know my friend Ritu is here. I know also my friend from US, Dr. Etta, she's also here. A good friend, Dr. Ponge, is also here. My friend from Zimbabwe, Dr. Shylock, please feel free. You can chime into the conversation. Just one, because we're almost at time, but I want to hear anyone just getting this, giving us a reflection. Yes, Carlos, you can give the floor to Dr. Ponge.
Especially Dr. Ponge, mzee wa Kiswahili, mzee wa vitendawili.
Hi, everyone. Dr. Mazigo, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Actually, one always looks forward to listening to this presentation over and over. I listened to it the first time you're presenting it to AfrEA. Then the time you presented it, was it in the US or in Canada? In the US.
In the US.
Yes, and we look forward to continue listening to these wonderful wise sayings of the sages. Now, I was really impressed when I listened to the proverbs that involve the local stakeholders. And I could see you had like 3 or 4 proverbs together, which were addressing a specific trait of involving the local stakeholders. Now, I want to find out, were the other sayings in the other categories, were they also grouped together to generate a category, or you were just coming up with a single proverb and then you analyze the single proverb to come up with one of the traits of, say, the qualities of an evaluator or something like that? And then also you did mention about the proverbs originally in the indigenous languages. I'm assuming that the indigenous languages in this particular case were not Kiswahili. And we're listening to the the Swahili proverbs and how they relate to the evaluation context in the English language. They were so sweet, like they were really in sync. And I'm trying to imagine, do you think it could have been possible that some of the sense of these sayings in the indigenous languages could have been lost in the process of translation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, about categorization, the use of the proverbs, you know, I don't use the same proverbs. You will have categories, and there are many on a certain category, but for the matter of presentation, I have just covered a few. But they speak a lot on several aspects, and as we grouped them, we have many of the proverbs. Some you in one category you will find like 10, some you will find like 3, some so that like that. So they are total making 45. And all this, when you're analyzing, they're offering some of the insights on several issues which are important for us to understand and inform about the evaluation and how to do it. So it's not the same proverbs, but there are many, and we do it. If you will see the report, which I know will be shared, you see that there is a lot of proverbs and a lot of analysis, especially highlighting their context, their original use, and how they are used in a different context, offers more rich ways of thinking about evaluation and issues around evaluation. Back to the indigenous people, regarding the question of the indigenous people, yes, all these were from the indigenous tribes. They are CaDEA, they are corrected from the African, the Swahili, the tribes in Tanzania, but they were corrected and then translated in Kiswahili. And I think they are still reflecting what was the aspect which was being covered there. And that's why their study wants you to go back to the original. When people are speaking about swimming in the water, is that people at the coast, what are they referring? They're referring on the competence. But when they have been brought into the Swahili, now we have even a better range because we are used to learn in schools and we can go ahead and use it. And the more people use it in a different context, you see a Proverbs of the Wahaya now is used by the Swahili, the other people in other contexts. So I think it's not losing, but it's enriching. And that is the beauty of what we have now as a Swahili Proverbs. It has been complemented in many ways. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doc. And thank you so much, Dr. Punge. I know we are at time, but just this one question, Daktari, we have it on our question and answer function, but I just read it for you. Swahili wisdom tells us about the centrality of process. The Northern global evaluation industry is anchored on a neoliberal framing focused on results. Any comments?
I really find this, first of all, question very useful because the kind of results that we might be considered to be able to tell that this project has succeeded or that, depending on how people judge. And they will judge depending on several aspects of the criteria that they use. And therefore, it will be different, the result that people will judge, it will be different depending on the process they were engaged. And in this process, it is now important because it is a more democratic and offer them to bring evidence of what they consider important. So the kind of results Group A will bring and the evidence to say that this has succeeded or failed or how they understand the promises which were being in the project is different from each other. And therefore, the process is more important because it will capture even competing interpretation of the results and the success or the failure and the evidence that put forward. And for this case, in this evaluation, what is important is the evidence of the story they are telling, given what they have experienced. And then whenever people validate, debate and validate it, they become to understand more of what the project has done and what results have been achieved. And that one now, it might be even different if you started from the results, but with the experience of the people, what they frame and they understand and the criteria they use to judge, the process is very important and is enabling them to determine the results, which could even be different from if we would approach with a different criteria. And this is what we found when we did a pilot. The pilot wanted to ask them, how was your experience with this project? What did you find it? What stories do you have? What we heard from the other group, the group 2 and group 3 was different, but as they go together, they were all bringing in the vision that and the evidence that people would say, yes, this is what happened. This is what I know. I never knew this evidence. So it was more comprehensive than limiting when you have the criteria already. Bringing the criteria that people have, and with that debate, people could themselves validate, and their role in the process of evaluation is to create that enabling environment for the people to debate, to critique, to validate, and then approve what they think was about the project. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm seeing a number of good questions, and I'll read one. I know we're almost at time actually, but yeah. So Dr. Shylock is saying that this is a great piece of work, and he wanted to know how can we use this to improve our evaluation principles. In short, what's next for Made in Africa evaluation?
First of all, I think this research is confirming and supporting a lot of the already the standards and the ethics that and criteria that is already in African AfrEA's evaluation standards. And what we need now is to see how this kind of process help to contextualize and enable the implementation of the principle. For example, when you speak about empowerment of the people, taking the issues that are important for them, caring for them, the evaluation that contributes to solving the problem, the evaluation that contributes to taking serious the issue that people consider important, the evaluation that empowers people, the evaluation that takes serious the ways of knowing and the value of the people, and bring the debate. So I think it's really enhancing that, and it's enhancing more on how this contextualizes now and enable the implementation of the principles. And by the way, Shylock, one of the articles which I'm writing now, I'm integrating this with the principles, African evaluation principles, and how are they rated and how are they being enhanced to enable the process, this democratic process, which takes serious the different perspective of the people, and it's how it could improve our way of doing evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doc. Another question, because I just feel these are very good questions, so I want to float them, and maybe just a minute or so, Dr. you can reflect on them, and I want to read one here. On selecting the proverbs along certain categories, were only positive proverbs selected? In Tswana, the language of the proverbs is mostly inhibitive because they were made to discourage certain behaviors. So what of those proverbs that does not necessarily favor your narrative? Do you ignore them and they do not do you ignore them? Yeah.
I saw that question. First of all, it's not that we have only selected the positive ones. We also selected the other which challenges on how to engage, which caution, which, which speak about the community that people need to. So there are a lot of things also which challenge the behaviors that we have. And what we did is when we're interpreting them, we are pointing on a positive way in the way it could be used to enhance the engagement. And that is what we want to do. What kind of proverbs, the wisdom, even if they are coming from a negative proverbs, how can we use it to empower us in a way we could engage and think the way of engaging other people? So here the issue is not about the proverb that we are going to use. All these proverbs that we have had, the negative, the one, have they enabled us to create a framework that will enable us to engage people in the evaluation, taking serious their perspective, taking serious their judgment criteria, taking serious the evidence, and debating them. So to debate all that and reach a consensus or diverses, but within the whole group, that is the process that we are talking about. And that has been constructed based on the negative and positive proverb that we're discouraging or supporting certain behavior. And therefore, it's not the proverbs that you will pay attention to. It's the process that it has enabled you. They have enabled us to create this kind of framework that will guide our evaluation process. Thank you.
All right. Yes, there is another question here. How do proverbs apply to the assessment of community actions? From Jean.
We have read several proverbs here. They are saying that some of the actions of the people, they could be harming the process. We speak of manahodha wengi, I think you heard about that. And therefore they are cautioning us on certain behavior of the people that we need to pay attention to because they could impair the evaluation. And these are the important evaluation that we need also to consider. And they give us an awareness that it's not easy to engage people and succeed to generate all these things. You need the competence, but also you need to know how to engage. And that is what the proverbs on the competencies and the attitude and the value that an evaluator needed to have developed to be able to succeed to engage people. Without that, you may lose control of the process. You may not be able, because your role there is to facilitate them to debate their narratives, to be able to co-create the story together. If you don't have those skills, if you have not developed them, then you will not succeed. And if you haven't developed the competence properly, or if you don't empower people to do so, then you will not, the process will not generate the intended results. So the Proverbs and the way it has informed the process, it is cautioning us on several issues, including the behavior of the evaluator and the behaviors of other stakeholders in the process who could also jeopardize the evaluation process.
Wow. Thank you so much again, Dr. Almas. This has been very, very insightful. It has reminded me, here in Kenya, we are taught the proverbs in our lower primary. Yeah. So this has really taken me back to that stage when when I just started schooling. I want to thank everyone. And I just want to check whether there is another question. All right, we don't have any other question. I know Dr. Almas will be available for anyone who would want to make a follow-up on this presentation, or even engage on broadly around this work. So we want to say thank you so much for this, Dr. Almas and TanEA. And us from AfrEA, we are very excited to see this work and to see this conversation again take shape as we continue nudging and moving forward with Made in Africa evaluation. Jean has another question, and I almost closed the session, but if Dr. you can just answer the last question posed by Jean, then just a minute. Cosmology is sometimes characterized by legends, and how can we apply this to the assessments?
Sorry, I didn't understand. What does he mean by cosmology? Hello?
If Jean, please, you could. Yes, can you hear me? Yes, Jean, if
you can give him to speak about what does he mean by cosmology. I know cosmology and other things, but I don't understand what does he mean by cosmology. The myth.
Oh, myth. Myth is sometimes characterized by legends, and how can we apply this to the assessment?
You see, there are a lot of myths that people have, and some of them has informed the way people have reasoned and created the proverbs. So sometimes the myth, I don't know how we can use them, but what I know that they have some wisdom. If correctly interrogated, we can now yield the kind of guidance that we might be getting from the myth. And that then can inform, you know, such kind of interaction. But what I want to say that all the proverbs, and they speak about the interaction and the relationship that we have, which could always have an impact on what we do. And therefore, awareness of this and the message that we could, and people will always make use of this wisdom and inform the action. So it all depends on how we contextualize them and develop and integrate them on how we train and conduct our evaluation. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And I want to thank each and every one of us for attending this session, and also keeping through up to this point. We highly appreciate and the great reflections that we've had from the audience. Very helpful for us, and we'll be taking this conversation further. So thank you so much, Dr. Almas. Asante sana daktari. Twashukuru, atasema asante. We want to say thank you, and we want to wish everyone a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Almasi.
Asante sana.
Asante.
Karibu.
Yeah.
Kevin, we can stop the recording.